Welcome to Brightly, You Radiant Being, the show that wildly recognizes, encourages, and invests in the radiance we all carry so you can shine your brightest. Each episode, we share soul-driven advice and topics to help you live more brightly in mind, body, and spirit. Through sharing our experiences, friendship, and passions, we hope to impact you to step more brightly into yourself, inch by inch.
Hi, Amy.
Hi, Tracy. I kind of panicked in the beginning because our cute little woman who says recording in progress was on a different screen and I couldn't get to it to close it out. So there I was with this. I have a tendency to wear all my emotions on my face. If you're not watching, good.
Also, I mean, I don't know how you're feeling, but I kind of forgot how to do the thing.
Oh, yeah.
If people haven't been listening, then hey, no time has passed. Time's a social construct. Great for you to see you again. I don't really know how to talk to the listener in that perspective, but you and I took some time for rest, and then it felt so good. We rested more.
Yeah, it's been a minute, hasn't it? It has been a minute.
I don't know about you when yours kicked in, but November kicked my butt, and it wasn't even around the holidays. So, um, uh, we pre-record, so nobody knew what we were going through for a little bit, but we both had some health stuff that really encouraged both of us to just kind of take it easy. And I'm glad that we, took the time to take our own advice, right? And just lean into it. And
well, I feel like it's so great for today's topic too, around boundaries, that this was sort of, I realized this was kind of a physical health boundary that we both went, we need to not do this right now.
Not do anything.
Yeah, mine happened right before the holiday, right before my birthday, actually, November 22nd. And I got my positive test result on COVID morning of my birthday on the 25th.
Oh, happy birthday.
Yes. I texted my sister and I said, happy birthday to me. I have COVID-19.
Put that on a cake.
And it wasn't just one of those, yeah, I had it. It was no big deal. It was like a cold. No, I was out. I did not raise my head for a long, long time. I've never felt like this, and I hope to never feel like that again.
One and done. That's the goal moving forward.
Yeah.
I think a big reason though why you are able to even record now today, less than a month later, right? Like you're still within just a few weeks of having it, and still, ultimately do feel like you have it, just to a lesser degree, right? But I think it's because you were able to benefit and take that time to rest.
My daughter said to me, she texted and she goes, honestly, Mom, I feel like you don't just do nothing enough. She goes, I don't think you rest or are late. And she's called it lazy, cozy, lazy. I'm like, oh my gosh, cozy, lazy. That's what I want to be for late. And that's what I was. Well, I mean, in the beginning, it was a little bit cozy, lazy. Then it was horrible. Then it went back to cozy, lazy again. But
well, COVID's a little bit scarier than your typical cold and flu season. Isn't it funny how sometimes we do need our bodies to say stop to get us to curl up on the couch and watch a movie and not feel guilty and like not work and not be thinking about 1,000 different things. And like your own health can be a form of productivity, right? Like we usually take that line of your own joy can be, but like your health is important enough. And I know a lot of people
felt like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Well, a lot of people, it takes really serious health concerns that, even outside of a virus or a pandemic to get them to stop and be like, oh, I haven't been taking care of myself, or, oh, my body does need to rest. And I think both of us stood up pretty quickly and we're like, we're going to rest. We're going to take a break. Things can wait.
Yeah. Yeah, and which was weird for me because I probably could have done it. I probably could have recorded the the Friday, whatever date that was, a week ago. But the more I thought about it, I was just like, oh, I can't. I just can't. I just know I can't. And
But
you were
also,
so gracious.
let's say that you had pushed yourself or even been like, yeah, I can do it, right? Um,
Mhm.
where would your healing be today, right? Would that have
Mm,
delayed how good you feel today? Um,
interesting. Yeah.
and that, I don't know, I feel like it's important to feel like you're back to yourself fully, not just like, oh, I can hustle and get through it, but like I am
See,
me before
that's
pushing
it.
myself. Yeah.
I feel like too often I do push myself to move through something. And typically I'm pretty darn healthy. I'm not on any
Yeah.
medication and I don't, I'm just typically a healthy person. Um, but even if little things come up, I'm like, I'm okay. Like when my foot was hurting so much, she was like,
Mm.
I can do it. I can still walk. No, fool, just sit
Yeah.
down.
Sometimes the power of positive thinking is not where it's at, right? Like, you can't will yourself to be healthy. I mean, attitude and belief is really important, but sometimes you do just
Mhm.
need to stop. So
Yeah.
for me, like you, I ended up in the ER a couple Sundays
Yes.
ago, almost 4 weeks to the date. And I was so healthy, but clearly in pain. They didn't know what was wrong with me. There's still a blurb in my little my chart that they're trying to figure out how to get rid of. They don't know how where all the ER doctor put it or where all it goes in. But he came and talked to me about shingles at some point because it was obvious I was in extreme pain, but neither the blood work, a CT, and an ultrasound showed what the heck was going on with my body. And so I was really, really thankful that I was healthy enough to go through this medical event. I ended up needing to have my gallbladder removed.
Mhm.
And since we don't need our gallbladder, they send you home right away. and, and I just kept telling myself, like every day that week, like even though I wasn't in extreme pain, and even though I could have worked towards the end of that week, I was like, you had an organ removed from your body 2 days ago.
You
Lay
had your
down,
body opened up.
right? Like there was a team inside of you and they
Yeah.
took something out
Out.
and then sent you home. Sit down.
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
like you don't have to be online. You don't like, I would all the time just be like, well, like you're in a good attitude and like your mind's fine, like you can think, but all of it is still kind of taxing. It's not rest, like your daughter was saying. Like rest is different than sitting. And so many people too, like these days when we, sit down and rest and watch TV, we're also on our phones or we're talking or we're texting or doing all this stuff. Like we don't actually just kind of rest and chill and
Yeah. I got to the point where because it did very much open up reading for me again in a big way.
oh
So I
nice.
read so many books, but then it got to the point where my eyeballs hurt.
Yeah.
Another fun thing with COVID, who knew? I couldn't look at screens. I couldn't look at my phone. I started to not be able to look at a book. And I found another podcast called Read to Me. And she
Oh,
just reads you stories. And of course, they're public domain, but every episode was a chapter. And so I started listening to Dracula, and she would read to me. And there I was in my little bed that's behind me here because I was quarantined from my husband. Um, and just it was like I was 10 again, and my mom was reading to me. So
oh.
that was actually quite lovely. And I want to write this person and just be like, thanks for helping me get through COVID.
Well, so today's episode is on boundaries, and
Mhm,
when we first talked about it and when we wanted it to post was just before Thanksgiving, right? Before,
mhm.
two of the biggest holidays in the United States kick off, where you're often with family you might not otherwise see or choose to interact with. You love them, you came from them, but it might be challenging to be around them. I think both of us just learned like boundaries are a form of self-care. So
Yeah.
I had no problem in the hospital not in the ER, but in the hospital being like, I'm not working. I'm not signing into the email. My out of office is on. It's very clear. I am out indefinitely. Talk to this person. If something's on fire, call a fireman, right? Like I am not talking to anybody for at least a week, maybe more. But that Sunday night, so I was admitted around 8. Around midnight, we knew I was going to be transferred, most likely for surgery for something. And I just looked at my mom and I was like, hey, when your husband, my stepdad, comes to get you, he has to stop at my house and get my laptop and bring it to me. And I'm going to do some stuff that'll take 10 minutes, but then you're going to take it with you because I can't have it alone in a hospital. It's for the we work for local government, right? Like that's a
Mhm.
safety and security thing.
Right.
And she's like, Tracy, it's gonna be like 2 a.m. And I was like, no, we have one big meeting a month. And while he's fully capable of doing all this, I already did everything for the meeting and I saved it to my desktop like a moron, right? Like I didn't follow my own protocols. And so I was like, this is, I want to do some things. It'll take 10 minutes. I'll send it all off and then I won't think about work. And like, what a poor boundary. Like, if he really needed it, he either A, could have recreated it, B, postponed the meeting, or C, asked the IT to log in, take it, and change my password,
So
right?
when
Like,
did
there
you
were so many
realize
options.
that though? When did you all of a sudden go, oh my gosh, what was I even thinking?
As I was doing it, I fully knew I
Oh,
was
okay.
insane, but
Oh.
I also knew I wasn't asking them to go too far out of their way. And everything was already bagged up and ready to go. And I needed them to grab some other things from my home and stuff. But so that week of, and then the following week, I still had really good boundaries. It was a holiday week, so we didn't have anything scheduled. But I still felt like, as an employee with almost no PTO left for the year, like I still have to log in, I still have to contribute. But then I had some really weird reactions to the stitches, to the glue, to the antibiotics. And so, again, since it's a holiday week, they just told me to take Benadryl for a week and call them. So that added to the sleepiness, right? And so I just kind of slept through the second week. And although I still had the boundary, it was weakening, right? Like it was faltering because I felt guilty. So it was draining me energetically, even though everybody I worked with was like, oh, go rest. Oh my God, are you okay? Like, yeah, this is fine.
But see, oh, you just hit on something so that is it for me. It's that feeling of guilt.
Mm-hmm.
So go ahead with that.
Well,
Like, so what? Yeah.
I felt like I could push myself and I could do more. But the more objective, rational side of me was, for the work me and my boss and I do risk management. Once a risk occurs, it's an issue, and like we tell the people who own it to go deal with it. So we already know we have no emergencies, right? Like we might have meetings we have to prepare for, and we might get asked to consult, but the best part of my job is that nothing is urgent and nothing nothing is, it's why I picked it. I used to work in a customer facing job. I used to work in manufacturing. Deadlines were huge. Things had to ship, or we had to get certain things done because our partners were in Asia. And so there's a time difference you're always trying to stay ahead of or keep up with if you don't want to wake up at 3 a.m. for a conversation and all this stuff. And so I think part of me was stuck in that old, um, corporate mindset of like, you just work all the time, right? Like it has to get done either way, whether or not you have PTO, whether or not you're sick. And then I was like, no, I chose my employer and my role with my employer because I didn't want that lifestyle, right? And it is okay. And I do have paid time off, and the work will get done when it needs to get done, and someone else can do it, right? Like, so I just felt like I was letting people down and that I was going to be judged for it. And then here, when I fully came back up after and started to share what, because my boss and I just said I was out of the office and he didn't share with anybody what was going on. When people found out, they're like, oh my God, are you okay? Like, we don't have to meet today, or do you want to, let's postpone this a week. Like, we don't even need to meet now. Like, it's okay that you're not ready, or like, can I take this off your plate? And like, so understanding. They took an organ. They took an organ, even if it's a useless organ. Like, I don't know why I was like, oh my God, with a week is enough to rest. Like,
See, and this is so interesting to me because I consider you someone who has really good, healthy boundaries.
oh yeah, that
But now
when I
I'm
was in the
thinking,
hospital, I was like, I don't care. Like I called my boss after
right.
surgery just to tell him I was okay. And we talked about my health. We didn't talk about work once.
Okay.
But once I was home and now I work from home, I was
Hmm.
like, oh, I should do more.
So that was, I think that's part of it. Okay. So we've already we're deep in this
Oh
conversation and
yeah.
I love it. So I feel like just so people are kind of with us on this, the things that you've been talking about are related to work, but it is more like these are our personal boundaries. Even though what you're
Yeah.
talking about is work, it's still considered your personal boundaries, right?
Hmm.
Is that, would you say
Oh,
that as well?
absolutely. Hmm.
Do you think you have different boundaries within that personal boundary with work over here and maybe different boundaries with people who are either related or friends or something like that?
Uh, like, am I stronger at maintaining boundaries in the different
Yeah, yeah,
parts of my life?
right.
I'm pretty even keeled with it. I
Okay.
think because my employer, it's a contract, and I've had to let people go over wage theft before, just not working when you say you're working. And now that I'm
Mhm.
working from home and they monitor, or my workplace and manager doesn't monitor, but a lot of people talk about you have that red, yellow, green on
Oh,
your
right.
team software, other software that shows whether or
Mhm.
not you're active and stuff. I'm so hyper aware that people might be misconstruing whether or not I'm engaged during the day, right? And so I probably have a little bit softer boundaries with my employer because I'm a single family household or a single earner. I got to pay my mortgage, right? Like they are
Mhm.
giving me cash. Whereas my other relationships, that to me is about how I feel in the world. And so I'm a little bit stronger with those boundaries because
Okay.
it's about the life I want to lead. I think when it comes to work, let's say I worked, well, I have worked. So I once worked for an employer where I told them I am moving and I need Thursday and Friday to move because I have people coming. I hired movers. It's that time of year, it's really hard to get. So I have a day where I'm moving out of one place and then a day where I am moving into the other. And then I just want to get fully set up because I work 90 hours a week here. You call me at all hours. I hate my life. I hate my job. I need 2 days, just 2 days off. And then my apartment will be set up. And the day before I moved, the two people above me, my boss and her boss, both quit and just left. And
Wow.
and I was fully capable of doing their role from a leadership level. But the CEO was like, you have to come in now tomorrow. And I was like, but I don't. You have to figure it out.
Good for
Um,
you.
or you're going to have a third person quit today. But I was like, I cannot. And I'm also going to be offline and I'm not attending these big meetings. You can fill me in. But I am physically moving my home. I don't have a wife or a husband to go and take care of this for me. I can't just have my kids watch the movers, right? I am solely responsible for my life. And he pestered me both of those days. And
What do you mean
then
by what do you mean by pestered?
oh, texts
Called
and
and
phone
text?
calls and just needing me. And he didn't. Um, and and then it just got more and more intense after that. I could see why the other two people left. And finally I decided, and this is where I'm really strong with work boundaries, I'm employable. Bye. And I
I
don't think
am
enough people
employable.
there were other people there that have worked there and dealt with that for 17 years and just felt like they were so heavy in the I could never get another job that they didn't have good boundaries with that employer because that tether hold on them of needing a job was so high.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. Although I felt bad about it, I took a full 2 weeks off of work. I mean, I got lucky there was a holiday in there, but I had my gallbladder out, I got the booster shot, and then I had all those allergic reactions to
Yeah.
everything. And then there was the
See,
holidays.
I didn't even hear about the booster shot and what happened with that because I was out
You were
of
out. Yeah.
everything. So I'm sorry I missed that aspect of all of this because I didn't even take a full 2 weeks. I was sick, but I went back to work on half day Thursday and then
Yeah.
Friday I was at work. But once again,
So here's the thing. So we've talked about off air, are your boundaries too loose, too rigid, just right? So
yeah,
although
yeah.
that I did let the guilt creep in and I stressed about stuff and I thought about work, I will say my work boundaries were still firm foundation and just right, because
Mhm.
even when it came to a weekend day and I was feeling better, I let myself do something for me that I didn't count recovering from a hospital stay count as my me time. I didn't decide to all of a sudden immediately start making up time on a Saturday, right? Like I
Mhm.
still maintain that boundary and that this is my weekend. I'm not supposed to work and the work will be there Monday and it'll be fine. And then in terms of making up work, I've been really blessed to have a good boss where I'm taking it slow and as the work is there for it so that I don't burn out by like immediately jumping back in and doing 10 to 12-hour days just to catch up or to make up that time, right?
Mhm.
And so I think my personal self-awareness that the guilt and shame will go away and it's self-created and nobody is judging me on this is
Yeah.
what helps me have good boundaries.
Well, especially when you got back to work and people were actually concerned, and so you had the I mean, there it was handed to you that
Yeah.
no one is judging you, right? So
Well, and
that's
so it's
yeah,
just it. You never know what someone's thinking about you,
right.
right? So
And
I knew
also it's none of your business.
exactly. You think but I think that's the problem with boundaries though, is we all get caught up in how we're making other people feel or
That is my
how
problem.
right? Or how they're going to think about us. And when it came down to it, I just kind of thought about the people in the office that were I was stressing myself out over. And I was like, well, this chunk of people cares about me and they've shared like, I want you to be well. And this chunk of
Yeah.
people, I really don't care what their opinion is. And then that's how I was able to have those days of rest, which I think is
Okay.
what allowed me when I did formally jump back into work, kind of like you were just talking about, I was me when I did it, right? Like I didn't have to push, I didn't have to hustle. I was already
Yeah.
there and fully ready to get back in. How
Yeah.
about you? So you talked about, work being a boundary, or is it a personal boundary, but like do you see it as different types of
I
boundaries?
so I am I think that depending on different um I've worked for the same employer for 25 years, but have held different
Yeah.
positions. And depending on the position, and I would say my maturity level, as I've matured, my
Hmm.
boundaries have gotten much better with work. And I've
Yeah.
been able to really establish good boundaries with work.
And your goals are
With
different too, right?
my
Like you're
goals are different,
you're
but
nearing retirement, I'm in the middle,
right,
right? And,
right.
and so this
So
is
I
going to
think
be yeah.
it's much easier to have firmer boundaries when you're nearing retirement because you just don't at a certain point you're like, I don't actually care.
Yeah.
Um, sorry, not sorry. But my personal boundaries where I get caught up with that is I worry about how I'm going to make someone else feel. And I like
Mm,
that distinguishing thing that you said. Worry about how someone's going to feel or worry about what they're going to think about you. So with my personal friend, family, I worry about how they're going to feel and I feel guilty.
mm,
With my physical boundaries, I know when I was a young adult, I worried about what other people would think about me. And I really struggled with that
so what
as
is
a
a
young
physical
adult.
boundary then?
So it's just basically who gets to come into your personal space, how they should act when they're there, and literally also like, oh, you're in my house. You don't get to act like that, or you don't get to treat me like that. And frankly, I took it as well as like what I would look for worth through um this is getting way off topic and probably too much information, but I'm going to go
It's
there
all
because
related. Go there.
yes, this was as a young adult. I would get too physically attached with someone and allow my too much openness and allow them too much. I would be available far too much for, and
Mm,
we're talking about the male persuasion here. Um, and I know that now I can look back and go, oh, sweetie, it's
mm,
okay. It's all right. so I'm much better with that now, of course. Again,
Mm-hmm.
maturity, it's an awesome, awesome thing. Um, but I can look back on that and remember those feelings. Did not understand at the time, didn't we didn't even talk about boundaries when, I was in high school or a young adult or anything like that. Too bad they didn't teach that in school.
They don't teach the things you really need. I had a friend who had been married twice. Um, One of her second husband, who she did end up divorcing, they moved in together 3 days after their first date. They were married for almost 7 years and had a kid together. And then just, things changed. And when she started dating again after that, she found herself in a kind of a serious relationship all of a sudden and moving really
Mhm.
fast, and the guy was making some physical demands or requests of her, and she realized, you know what, okay, one, this relationship is done, which good on her, but two, she's no longer going to kiss people that she's dating because she realizes it causes her to move a lot faster and make certain decisions and do other things than she wants to, and so she tells people right off the bat, like, and it's not even a timing thing, but it is definitely not in the, first 3 dates window that's become kind of
Yeah.
typical. There's a
And
relationship
who
coach.
actually made that a rule?
It's such a weird thing. But there's a dating coach that she's really big on TikTok a year or two ago. But she has a 3 month rule of no intimacy or physical intimacy, unless, like, let's say it's somebody you were really close friends with and you already know who they are as a person, right? But like
Okay, I
it
get
takes
that.
it takes a certain amount of days, and usually it's within that 3 month window, for a person to start acting like themselves. And so, especially for women and
Oh,
pheromones and kissing and the stuff that we're passing, she's just like, take that out of the equation so that it's not affecting your decision making, or how you're interpreting or seeing things, right?
yeah.
And so that's not going to be true for everybody. It's definitely not like a slut shaming tactic, and it shouldn't be used
Oh,
for
no.
control, right? But it's
Mhm.
a boundary that I really appreciated my friend recognizing that for herself, because we knew each other because we were in a master's of counseling psychology program with each other. I chose not to finish and end the program. She was actually a licensed therapist at the
Doesn't
time,
mean you don't
and it
make
didn't
mistakes.
doesn't mean it, but I love that she used what she did know to have a self-awareness about her, and then it was
Yeah.
really uncomfortable for her to set those boundaries, and she thought, and she was also, she's now, at the time she was in her late 30s and a single mom, and so she was like, this is going to narrow my pool of eligible men even more. And then I realized, well, why would I want an eligible man who doesn't respect my physical boundaries, right? Like, so I'm okay with that
Good
pool being
on
narrowed.
her.
And so I
Yeah.
think it's all about like flipping the script, boundaries have to come from a place internally of, how do I want to feel? And then you have to be able to communicate that, or at least make decisions that make sure that you are taken care of, because other people aren't going to make those decisions for you.
Well, honestly, one of the main things I think too, uh, not I think, it's just that is really important to remember, is that in order to set boundaries, you have to understand yourself and actually choose what boundaries you need to set, which again, we talk about this so much, is like that reflection piece and knowing yourself and understanding what you need and what you don't need.
Yeah,
But
so personal boundaries sound like how somebody treats you at kind of its core. And that's a
relationships, right?
relationship.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
that could be an employer, a boyfriend, girlfriend, husband, partner, spouse, friend,
Hmm.
parents, family, especially your
Yeah.
children, stuff like that. Then there are physical boundaries, which is your physical person, your body, but also your space and your environment. And I
Hmm.
love that you brought up home. And I'll bring up car. My very first car that I got, even though my dad paid for it, it was a $300 vehicle. So I'm not saying he bought it a lot, and I made sure he knew how much he spent on this car. Um, but it was in my name, and I had put well more than $300 into the upkeep and maintenance of it at this point. And my dad rode with me somewhere, and he was trying to control not only the radio station, but the volume and whether or not I sang with it. And I just remember a Chris Isaak song, Wicked Games, where he sings really high pitched. And I am not a singer by any means, where I cranked it, sang as loud and obnoxiously as I could. And I just remember looking at him and being like, not your car, can't get mad, not your car, can't get mad, and like made a joke out of it. And thankfully he was it, but it was like a great memory at that point. But I was also pretty firm, and I was like, yes, you paid for it, but it was a gift. That is done. This is my vehicle. And if you want to be in it, if you are the one needing her and wanting a ride, and if we're not, like, you have to put up with my rules and my mess and how I want to do things.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like 16, 17, and that's hard for a parent to hear, but also I was pretty firm. Like, it either is mine or it's not. Because if it's not mine, it's going back in your name. I'm not paying the insurance. I'm not paying the upkeep, and I will start walking, right? Like, I will go buy a bike.
See how good your boundaries are?
But that was also birthed out of annoyance for me with how he was treating me in the car. That
Interesting.
kind of like some parents get like, how dare you treat me like this in my house? I kind of like flipped the script on him and was like, how dare you treat me, and like, because he was being a jerk about it too. It wasn't even just like, oh, I don't really like this station, can we listen to something else? Like, he just started moving things and turning things and touching things, and I was like, where are your manners? I know you raised me. I know you ain't supposed to do this. Okay, so we talked about personal, kind of a personal, physical. You mentioned
and
energetic.
yes, energetic boundaries, which I don't think people think about, except maybe empathic people. But a lot of times I think empathic people or people with high empathy, I don't think they realize that sometimes their energetic boundaries might not be good, and the feelings that they're feeling aren't their feelings. So anyways, your energetic boundaries, the cool thing with this is that you don't have to worry about anyone else, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to be like, look, all right, guys, here we go. This is what I'm going to be doing. It's just you yourself, right? Me, myself, and I. And you have to just kind of be like, all right, I need to put up boundaries so that my energy stays with me, doesn't get siphoned off by someone else, and their energy stays with them so that I'm not sucking in someone's bad mood, right? Mm-hmm. That's happened to all of us.
Or their sadness, right? Like, you can be detached and still be empathetic. Like, that's why I didn't continue in the counseling program, is because I do feel more empathetic. I did have a problem with energetic boundaries at the time. I didn't have a lot of personal support in my life. And here was a group of professionals teaching me what I thought was how to be heartless. And I just couldn't put that wall up. And I was, and so in talking with them, although I was really great with my patients and my clients, I was more an intuitive counselor versus like a formulaic, like I follow Freud or I follow Jungian psychology or something like that, that I really kind of went with where the client, what each individual client needed. So that in itself drains your energy, right? Because you're tailoring every single practice. But I took all of their stuff home with me, and then I didn't have the supports at my home to not only help me deal with that, but help me deal with my stuff, which some of it was the same things my clients were going through, right?
Right. And then it's even harder to distinguish what's yours, what's theirs. And I'm not saying, like you just said, you don't have to be heartless.
Yeah.
And you
so
don't
that's
have to be, you can still have emotions. Of course, you're still going to have your own emotions. And frankly, you sometimes will still pick up on other people's emotions. It's one thing to pick up on them, like, oh, I can tell you're sad. Do you want to talk about it, without making it your sadness?
Yeah. So for me, I ended up avoiding it while I learned the skills, because I was having a hard time learning and practicing the skills together, and still doing self-care. Right. And at the time too, I was like, this does feel heartless. And now I view my own therapist differently and wonder stuff about him and this and that. But now with time and age and maturity and experience, I recognize there's a difference between holding space for someone and being in the space, that emotional space, energetic space.
Are you holding the space, or are you the vessel?
Yeah,
It's yeah,
exactly. Are you
yeah,
allowing it to be there, but
yes,
be theirs?
right,
Or are you, taking it on as your own, and
right.
dealing with it for them, which helps neither of you.
Right. So the thing with this, I actually have, I'm probably better at this than any of the other boundaries, but it's because I don't have to worry about other people's feelings.
Mm-hmm.
Even though this one has to do for me, other people's feelings, but I know, well, first of all, and you have to be in your body. You have to be in your body when you consider this. So I know that maybe with some people, they're like, oh, yeah, I get that. And other people are like, what is she talking about in your body? Where else would you be? Like out thinking about other things and floating around and just not being grounded. So that's one of the main things is to just like sit quietly and ground yourself. That's what I do. I ground
Mm-hmm.
myself. And when I ground myself, I literally envision roots coming out of the bottom of my feet. Sometimes they're coming out of my root chakra. So a root going into the ground, and I'm envisioning this
Mm-hmm.
going deep into the earth until it hits the center. And that's like I am rooted. And then I can envision a protective light around me. I always think of a white light. Um, and then just to be in your body, you say your name out loud, or you're like, I am Amy. This is me. This is what I'm thinking. This is what I'm feeling, especially, and this can happen like before you go into a group of
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know, Christmas Day or something,
Or even the state
or
fair. Like, I mean, sometimes I go to a yoga class
strangers.
and whatever the
Mhm.
person next to me is going through is like, oh God, this is now affecting my experience. I can't even
Yes,
talk.
absolutely. I have been in situations where before I walk through a door, I'm just like, let me
Ooh.
just quickly do this
Mm-hmm.
before I walk in. But sometimes in the moment too, maybe you didn't do it beforehand. You can just quickly do it in the moment and after. Like, say you're just like, I didn't ground myself, I'm being bombarded. Afterwards, you can go and just like get back to yourself,
Mm-hmm.
saying your name to be like, this is just me. I'm Amy. I am only going to feel my feelings. You just proclaim that um, as you're
So
grounded.
there's a couple different other visualizations too I like for that.
Yeah.
That same counseling friend and her husband, I think it's from the Abraham Hicks and Esther Pearl and those books,
Yes.
but it's
Yes.
literally envisioning a cloak around you, and that
Oh,
cloak is
that's
protecting.
cool.
So it's also thinking of
Mm-hmm.
it in terms of protecting you. I recently
Mm-hmm.
went on a ghost walking tour of Minneapolis, and the person who led that, it was just a bunch of stories around town, right? Like
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
were like hunting and ghosts. We were just walking around town hearing some history,
See,
some stories,
if
but
I go on a ghost walk, I want to be hunting.
but what she mentioned, which I appreciated, because I do feel kind of like you said, sometimes before I even enter a room, sometimes really old homes in St. Paul, I can't go to certain art museums here because there's just a feeling, and it hangs on me, or I feel like it pulls my energy, or it's not my
Yeah.
energy.
Yeah.
But she talked about how important it is to envision like purple light raining on you, and that'll wash away anything that you don't want.
Yeah.
And then also, and this is where kind of it's not just visualization but acting out. And so sometimes, like you said, you were talking about, to be prepared for things, you have to be grounded and present in your body to be able to maintain these boundaries that you're setting energetically, right? To be aware, especially of certain family members that bug you or stuff like that. What I like to do afterwards is envision I have a giant knife, and that these are just all these cords. All these people attach cords to me, and I just take my broadsword and whip it around, and I cut those cords, right? And so
I
even if,
love
like,
it.
let's say I attach to someone else too, like, we're done. Like, we all do this, right? Like, I'm just as guilty as other people for kind of, latching onto others intentionally or unintentionally in certain ways energetically. But so like that physical act makes me feel like I'm a part of it. So whether you believe in the magic, or if it's,
Yeah.
psychosomatic and stuff like that.
I love the
I just
sword.
like, I got
Yeah.
the sword, I hack it away. I also like to envision the light kind of bathing. Water's key for this. You can do it in the shower. Like you can just physically,
Oh,
like actually
actual water.
just say this
Perfect.
is washing away
Mm-hmm.
anybody's energies that are not in
Mm-hmm.
my, highest and greatest good. Oh, what was the other one?
Oh, so that reminded me of something I do, but it's typically in meditation where or just visualizing it, where I'm literally like gathering other people's energy off of me to the
Mhm.
point where then I have this like glowing ball of other people's energies that then I can just like direct out somewhere else, or sort of like,
Yes.
now you shall be stardust, that kind
You're
of thing.
free. What I also like to do, I think I've joked on the show, like sometimes when my sisters are going through something, whether it's a love thing or a family thing or what, and they come over or whatever, I sage them. You do not get to bring that stuff in here.
Oh,
So
yes.
I think I talked
Yes.
about how mad I was for forgetting to sage someone before they came in because I could feel it afterwards. And then there's someone in my family who, while I recognize everything is a choice, I feel like given their medical and financial situation, sometimes I do give them rides. I'm choosing to do it. Doesn't feel like a choice. If I really had to, I'd get them an Uber if I think they'd take it. So I got a sage spray for my car. So I physically prepare my space ahead of time, like, hey, nothing gets to stay in here. And then once they're gone, and then when they're in there, I at least feel like I have a plan, right? So even if none of this even works, I feel more in control of something I generally
Mhm.
used to feel not in control of, because it's my space, right? And so like my home, I'm a little bit firmer on, like you were talking about, who can or cannot come in here, and I will kick you out, right? But my car, and in that situation, I'm gonna bring them home, right? Like we're going to achieve the goal we set out to and then go back home.
Yeah.
It's a few hour
Yeah.
period, so at least this way I at
Okay.
least feel like I'm ready for it.
So if anyone's still like wondering like why they need to set boundaries, like why would you say people should set boundaries?
So it's about how you want to feel and how in control of your own life you are, right? So this isn't about in control, like I control what everybody does and says, and
It's your own
how they
autonomy.
treat me, right? But it is maintaining that autonomy of,
Mm-hmm.
you know what, I don't feel good when I interact with this friend or this colleague, or somebody that keeps inviting me out to coffee, and I'm not getting anything out of it. And not that it has to always be a reciprocal thing, but like I either feel drained after it, or I feel worse, or I don't feel energetic about it. A
Mm-hmm.
boundary then is being like, you know what, like I'm not going to come to these anymore. I'm not going to say, let's
Yeah.
get coffee when I don't mean it. I'm not going to agree to get coffee when I don't mean it. Right. And so it's about taking that, like setting that intention for yourself and then only allowing those things in. So the problem with that, though, with setting especially personal and physical boundaries, is
Mm-hmm.
sometimes there's a loss associated with it. So let's say you just don't like
Yes.
a certain thing a person does, and you've communicated to them, when you do this, I feel this, I would like you to not do this. And then they continue to do the thing. You now have to decide if the boundary is worth a loss in your life, right? Like, is
Really
that
good
friend or
point.
family, right?
Yeah.
When it comes to boundaries and setting boundaries, there's so many benefits to it, but I feel like so many people avoid it because there are losses, it is awkward, and it's
There's
very
hard
direct.
conversations.
Mhm.
And you're right, it can be very awkward. And it's also where there are times that I have actually set a boundary and then communicated it, and somebody else has just been like, why? Like questioning. And then you're like, oh, I thought you were just going to be okay with that. Like,
Well, and
no.
here's the thing about a boundary and how you know if it needs to be enforced or not. The people in your life who truly care about you will accept it and do their best. They might need reminders here or there, or from you, but they will accept it and move on. How you'll know the boundary is absolutely needed and this person probably shouldn't be in your life is if they constantly question it, ignore it,
Mm.
intentionally go through it. to a point where I mean, do you feel safe or not? How's your mental health, right? Like, so the people in my life, I'm like, when you do this, I feel this. If it's anybody that immediately goes, well, when you do this, I feel this, like, okay, that is a conversation that needs to be had. But right now, we've just completely ignored what I said. So I think setting boundaries, that is a conversation that also needs to be held around, like, am I accepting other people's boundaries? Am I noticing other people's boundaries? How
Really
do
good
I
point.
respond? Right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
you know, so you mentioned autonomy. It's around your identity. It's for,
Good mental
work,
health you
family,
mentioned.
yeah,
Yep.
burnout,
Mm-hmm.
behavior. Um, but I'm sorry, like, let's say, I hear all these girls either after a breakup or even when they're in a relationship, or like people with tarot card questions, right? Typically around relationships. And just because I'm a girl, I hear about it from other women. This is not to say that men don't have their own concerns, but they'll talk about how, like, they've told their fella something that they need or that they want, and how the fella just, like, either gaslit them about it or chastised them or told them why they didn't. And then they wanted to know, like, how can I be better in this relationship? And I was like, you can walk out that door. Like, you can, what? The person that I love and give myself to needs to hear my boundaries, right? And if they can't
Hmm.
accept them, then that's a separate conversation. So again, it comes to that loss or change piece.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but what I think is the most important among this, you talked about, like, being really self-aware and really knowing yourself and your
Mm-hmm.
needs. Because I'll take it a step forward further. You have to be able to clearly communicate.
Absolutely. And that I think what happens with me is that I forget that I have to clearly communicate because I haven't completely clarified what the boundary is and how I need to talk about it. So it's almost like it's a knee jerk reaction for me. And I don't spend enough time with myself and with the proposed boundary in my head to be able to clearly communicate about it. I think that's key. And it's one of those things you can't just set a boundary and not let anyone know about it, right? Or
Well, and
spring it
that's,
on
so
them.
many people think it's implied, or sometimes they
Mhm.
don't give the people the chance to correct their behavior and kind of change what the boundary looks like. So there's someone in my life who has a
Ah,
really firm behavior about something, but they don't know how to communicate it in a way that this other person will really hear it. And so they're trying to communicate it in all these other ways that's sidetracking the conversation. And then it's not going to get them the results that they truly want, because now it's about
mhm.
this other thing, right? So you have
Ooh,
to go to that root cause of why you're feeling how you're feeling, and be really clear about it. And objective. You have to be able to give objective experiences. So when this is around how you're feeling, that can be hard to come up with,
yes.
right? And so it's important to be like to be able to give examples of situations, and just acknowledge sometimes the people aren't going to be able to hear it, but at least you communicated it. And then you have to say what you want the desired behavior to be, right, moving forward. So you can't just say, I feel this when you do this. You have to then frame what you're willing to accept moving forward, right? So, like,
Okay, explain that.
so let's say, okay, so for me, a boundary that I have, I don't always like having my photo taken. I don't. And in
Mhm.
this day and age, that's really hard for some people. And I also don't like it when people put my pictures on social media in a group or otherwise. And I really especially hate it when they then tag me or put my full name, right? So there's like this whole kind of list of grievances. So at first, I would just avoid the photos, like the book in the face, water bottle, turn away, walking away, and just being like, no, just saying no. And
Mhm.
that wasn't working because I wasn't giving anybody a reason, and I wasn't talking about it as a boundary. I was just assuming that my actions and behavior were obvious to everybody, that I don't want to
Sure.
be in the picture. So then as
Sure.
I got a little bit older, I started to the people who did it the most and say, I don't want to be in any photos. Please don't take photos of me. Then it was still occurring. Uh, so then instead I would say, like, I will let you know when I want to be in a photo, or I am willing to be in, X amount of group photos, but I don't want to be in any candid photos. And then that morphed into, and that still wasn't being that if you continue to take pictures of me when I don't want them to, and I've expressed I feel uncomfortable, I will stop coming to these events. So, and then also with me, it's around enforcing the boundary. So I know I don't say it every time somebody takes a picture of me, but when I do notice it on social media, if I don't like it, I just will go and ask, like, hey, I don't like that picture of me. Could you please take it down? And see
Mhm.
what they say. And then God bless Instagram and Facebook. They're terrible in so many ways, but I now have the ability to remove my own tag. So I don't have to have that conversation
Oh,
with
thank
people anymore,
goodness.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's just kind of a cultural thing that's so different among people. But so it started with me assuming that me dodging out of photos and getting in a bad mood should have been obvious to everybody. I don't want to be in this. But then it became clear that these pictures are important to, this person, and they're a photographer and this and that. So then I got clear. I don't want to be in any candid pictures.
And
And I,
also, your assumption about something does not mean that the other person understands what it
Mhm.
is you want.
Yeah. And different people in my family, I've given different reasons as to why, based on the level of understanding I feel that they would have,
Sure, I
right? Or
get
like
that.
somebody I just met, I'm not going to fully dive down into the, why I don't want a picture taken. I'm just going to say, oh, I don't want to be in the photo. And then to me, whether or not people can respond to such a fairly simple thing, you're not going to die, we're not going to go without food, our event will still be fun if I'm not in a picture, right? Whether or not they can respect my boundary, huge indicator into how well they're going to respect bigger boundaries later on, and whether or not I'm going to want to be with a friend with
Good
this person.
point.
So
Yeah.
I'd say another one, until recently, I didn't drink alcohol till I was 37 years old.
Yep.
I didn't have a reason why I didn't drink, but I also didn't feel like talking about it, and I'm also a vegetarian. Don't eat animals. It's not plant-based, it's not for my health. Don't eat animals. I don't preach that to people, right? Whether or not people made a big deal of one or both of those things in a social setting indicated whether or not I would want to be friends with them or how cool they were. So when I first met the two guys next door to me, they have a good time. They're single, no kids, great group of friends. And I get invited to things, and I know that I knew right away that they and their friends were really cool, awesome people, because they'd offer me a drink and then say, no thanks, I don't drink. That was the end of the conversation. Oh, do you want to, oh, do you want, oh, and then they have bubbly water for me now moving forward, and they
Mhm.
make sure that they keep that for me. I was at like a weekend long bachelorette thing, and they were doing drinking games. So I went and bought my own carbonated water or whatever. But then after 2 days of drinking, everybody was drinking my carbonated water. And and I didn't care. I was glad they were hydrating. But it really upset one of the hosts of the event. And he went to the grocery store and bought me water and put it in a different fridge just for me, because he wanted to make sure that I had that and I didn't feel awkward and out of place moving forward.
Well,
Whereas,
I will say, and this is just kind of an aside, it's happened where I've had like plant-based food at an
yes.
event. So I brought it myself because nothing there was
Uh-huh.
anything I could eat. And then other people wanted to try
Right.
my food,
Yep.
right? And it's like, uh, it was very hard for me to be like, well, this is all we had. And this is what it,
Yes.
because my son at the time as well, I was like,
Yeah.
this is all we can eat.
As an event planner, I went through that regularly with gluten-free options where they're
Oh,
typically more expensive, or even like, let's say, we have
mm-hmm.
the standard muffins and donuts and pastries or whatever. And then I get a small amount of yogurts and fresh fruits that those who can't eat gluten have something to eat as well. And the amount of people, even with the labeling, separate tables across rooms, stuff like that, that would still come up and grab it. I was like, I get that you would like yogurt. I have noted that, and I have let the people who pay for things and make decisions know we should have these more expensive options for a larger group. um, but that they had a hard time being told no, and that's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen when you set boundaries. And that's when that whole understanding you're not responsible for how other people feel is going to be really key when it comes to enforcing your own boundaries. That No is a full sentence, right? Like if, let's say even you just aren't at
We
a place.
gotta disagree because that I have said that and it has not been accepted.
It's still a full sentence, so it's on them for not accepting it. But you don't have to, like when people be like, oh, why don't you drink? I, I don't. Oh, well, just have one with me. No, no, like i I think I think partially, both you and a few other people in my life have mentioned like I'm really good at setting boundaries, and I
Mhm.
think part of it is I'm okay with the awkward. I'm okay with silent because I know I'm not the one creating the situation, right? So it goes back to the guilt and the shame and all that, that it is the person who does not have the manners to let something go and to accept something you have said for yourself. And if they keep bringing it up in a public situation, I just, no, no. And then after three no's, I'm just silent and I just look at them and I just allow the silence, allow the awkwardness. And then sometimes I just leave. I just leave and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with missing part of an event because somebody, was making it weird, right? And I think that's the energetic piece for me. I'm very protective of the energetic side of it to the point where I'll avoid, right? And that's not always the healthiest, right? You shouldn't have to feel like you're
Mhm.
missing out on an event, or like I changed careers after establishing thousands in student loan debt because it was like, oh yeah, no, can't do this, don't want to do this. But I'm okay with what I'm losing, right? Like I can have fun whether or not I'm at this party with people who are drinking, right? So like if they're not gonna have fun with me around, okay, cool. Talk to you guys later. Let's get breakfast next time, right? Like let's do something where we don't drink. Okay, bye. Right. And then sometimes too, like the people who are cool with my boundaries, sometimes then they'll be like, no, we want you to stay. And then it'll, other people can help support your boundaries then, right? Like um that's also how I know people are cool with like the meat or the alcohol thing, is sometimes people at like a company, it happens mostly at company events, but at a company event won't let it go. And I'll be like, oh, it's not polite dinner conversation, or, oh no, I don't want to talk about it, but thank you, thanks for your interest. Maybe another time. And they
Thanks
won't,
for your
right?
interest.
Thanks for
Thanks for your
interest,
misplaced interest
right?
in
But just,
something that is none of your business.
yeah, and I'll try and politely change the subject or something else. And I've had a few situations where people across the table would just be like, Paul, drop it. Like, and they'll step in and I appreciate that. And so I also try and look for that in my own life too. You don't want to be someone's savior if it doesn't seem, like you want to take a beat and make sure that they need the support before just rushing in and saving them, like allow them the chance to say no and stuff like that. But I think boundaries are easier to set, especially in families, if other people are like, I got your back, or I'll help you with this, right?
Well, I
Um,
think boundaries are easier to set if boundaries are a thing in a family.
that too. Um, yeah, and that's also the other thing with boundaries, is that communication piece is only if you feel safe. And if you don't feel safe, it's just putting yourself, choosing as much as you can to not be in the situation in the first place where a boundary won't be
Yeah,
respected.
I think that's a really good point. I can remember trying to bring up a boundary that I had within a relationship, and was basically, I was then from that point for quite a few days did not feel safe after that, um, because was just completely berated,
Mhm,
had a coffee cup thrown at me,
mhm.
and didn't hit me, just so everyone knows, hit the wall right next to me. Um, and basically was told that, I was acting crazy. And
I
yeah.
mean, this is my, unofficial, or I don't know if there's any data on this, but to me, the people you need to set boundaries with the most are going to be the ones who are going to have the hardest time with the boundary in the first place, right?
Yeah.
That typically unspoken boundaries do exist in relationships, right?
Hmm.
Or they're just kind of mentioned one and done, or, oh, these are my preferences in life. And then the other person just naturally modifies their behavior, right? And so sometimes when you have to set these like really concrete barriers of a boundary up, the other person might have a really hard time with it. And so in this day and age of being able to text and call incessantly and always be available and email and Facebook, all these different ways somebody can reach out to you to either push the fact that they want to talk you out of the boundary, right? Or all the reasons why you're wrong or gaslight you or whatever, or just not adhere to the boundary, period. And so the one thing that I think most people don't do is don't engage. It's kind of Psych 101, negative attention is still attention. You have to let them process their emotions on their own, right? So you get to ignore them. I turn notifications off on for many reasons, but none of my apps have the little red button who tell me when somebody texts. I choose energetically when I'm ready to receive a message, right? Because we're not getting that choice when someone sends it, so that I know if there is, or when I see certain people in my life who energetically drain me, calling me, if I'm not in that space to deal with that, I don't answer the phone and I don't listen to the voicemail until I am. And that also means I might be missing out on an emergency, or I might be missing out on, something fun. I'm okay with those losses. I'm okay with that, right? So, yeah. So that's how I automate my boundaries, to be honest. Like
automate my boundaries. I like that. I need to automate my boundaries, I think. Yeah.
So, this will probably come up a lot in future conversations, but be as consistent as you can, clearly communicate, and then just you can walk away. And that's hard, but you got to do your self-care piece yourself.
Yeah. And I love too that we talked about like a responsibility piece, that it's not your responsibility how they act or their reaction to what you've decided to set, right?
So
yeah.
Did you ask the tarot
I
any
did ask the
questions?
tarot.
What do you ask? What do
I'm
you
trying to
ask?
think. I think typically I say, like, what does the collective need to know
Okay,
about
same.
this?
Yeah.
Yep. So that's typically what, and a card, it was like, this card wants to be the card that comes out. So for this instant, I shuffled, but then I spread them out in an arc, and then I just like chose the card, and then I went, oh, it wants this card too. So the first card that I got was the 8 of Swords, and I don't know. I'm not.
Damn, that's a deck. That's you're using. What deck are you using?
The Spellcasters deck.
So for if you're not on YouTube, which I encourage you to go look at the 8 of Swords in the Spellcasters deck. So instead of just a female presenting person bound in front of 8 swords in the ground, this one, the ground's on fire behind the person.
Yeah. Typically, I think in this deck, swords are fire. I don't know why, which
so instead of air energy, they're
instead
fire
of
energy.
Air, but I don't read it like that, but the fire just adds to sort of the whole thing. But so this card right away, I was just like feeling powerless. And honestly, if you do not set boundaries, you are going to feel powerless. You're just going to feel like people walk all over you and you have no autonomy.
And that to me is when I know I need a boundary. Anytime I feel I don't like, so that when I talk about how I want to feel, I think it all stemmed from I had in my teenage years, I felt powerless in a lot of situations, and setting boundaries gave me my power back.
So sometimes you don't know when you need a boundary until you actually feel that so powerlessness.
For me, powerlessness, I feel it as like my gut dropping. And then that is all of a sudden I do not like this. I am leaving. Right. And so sometimes I will physically remove myself, figure out what just happened, what's going on, and then set the boundary. Right. Like, I don't think enough people realize you can just walk out. You can just leave events. You can even do it at work too. Get HR involved after, like, this is how I felt. This is why I did it. It's not always going to have a great result, but like you can always just physically remove yourself.
So I think a lot of times we just are like, well, I guess I just have to sit here. And the book for this tarot deck, the book actually says for this, the comfort of submission. So this says to me that someone who would rather put up with like whatever, name your poison is, you'd rather just put up with this other person's BS than have to confront someone in a situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there's comfort in this almost
Well,
martyrdom.
and I couldn't tell through the screen on this Eight of deck or Eight of Swords, but in the traditional deck, I believe she can take her bindings off.
Oh, absolutely.
It's
This person
relatively
can as
loose,
well.
right?
In
Like the
fact, the
hands are
bindings
tied.
are up here. Her
Yeah,
hands, it looks
are
like her
free.
wrists are only just crossed, not
Yeah, and
bound.
it's your the eyes are covered, right? So it's kind of
Yep,
like,
the eyes are covered.
allowing yourself to be blind.
And then this one has a bull. And
Mm,
so a bull to me is, of course, stubborn. And it's like you're just sitting there, you're just sitting in the situation, right? Just kind
mm-hmm.
of allowing it. Well, then the other card that was like, choose me as well. I said,
Pick
okay,
me, pick
I will
me.
pull you. And this to me felt like the antidote. So this is the Seven of Wands. Another, do you want to describe it for me since I've got it at
Yeah,
the,
so the this particular it kind of actually looked like a page card at first because they're only
yeah,
holding one wand up, kind of resting it over their
yeah,
shoulders, and really a power pose, right? So just
yes.
a stick is draped behind their neck, one hand is resting on the stick holding it up, the other, it's kind of a Peter Pan card, the other is like kind of standing hand on hip. But then when you look at the bottom of the card, if you back it up a little bit, Amy, the other six wands, the sticks, are on the ground and they're standing on top of them.
Yeah. So this one to me was just like this, well, and Seven of Wands is overcoming adversity, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
or your adversary. You're standing your ground, which you have to do with boundaries. Obviously, you have to stand your ground. And then this person has a triangle within a square on their shirt. Um, and that symbolizes spark of hope. And then the bird is clear vision. So, what I love about that is to set your values, right? You have to know what your values are. So then you can set a clear vision of your boundaries, and challenges must be faced. So, I want everyone to just kind of keep this image in. This is like this brave, and I want to make a distinction wishing fact here, not fearless, because we all need to, that's not a thing, but
But
this is a
courageous.
brave, yes, um, person uh with one wand over their shoulder, foot resting on top of the other wand. This is someone determined. And I just want everyone to keep that in their head and think, imagine this person, there you are. You've got this. You can do it.
And honestly, I mean, just to end with it, if you're not going to enforce your boundaries, why the hell should anyone else? Right? It has to start with you.
It
And you
does.
absolutely can lean on others for support, but you you actually get to pick how people treat you. Maybe not all the time in the public and stuff like that, but in your personal sphere, you got choices. And a lot of times we feel like we don't, but you do. And that's
Yeah.
so what are
Yeah.
you
I love that.
so what's
So,
coming up?
yeah. So next week we're going to be talking about, we're closing out the wheel of the year, closing it out. And I shouldn't say closing it.
It's a loop.
We're getting to the end and then the beginning. Well, actually, we already got to the end. Never mind. That's a
And every
completely
6 weeks is a
confusing.
new cycle. So we
And
can't even
every
say we're
6 weeks
ending the
is a new
cycle.
cycle. Right. We're not ending the cycle. It's just a new spoke on the wheel of the year.
It's one of our
Yule.
favorites.
So it is. Yule is actually one of my absolute favorite.
And if you're watching
So
on YouTube, you can see it's more dramatic on my screen, less so on Amy's, but the sun has literally set in the hour we've been talking. And it was so bright when it started. One half of my face was really, really well lit, and the other was completely in shadow. And now
yeah.
I'm only illuminated by my monitor because I did
Yeah.
not think ahead.
So Yule is definitely the evening of the year.
And while it's
Yes.
exciting though, is it's bringing the light, right? Like it starts to get lighter moving forward. So
Yes.
we're
So it
welcoming and
might be
opening to the light.
the darkest day, but then after that, it just gets a little bit lighter, or, later. It stays lighter longer. So that's what we're
Well,
talking about next time.
and I'm excited because presuming we don't need any more rest, it's gonna post on our 1 year anniversary. So it's it's
Yes.
it's a end of a cycle for us in so many ways, or start of a new
Yes.
cycle. So all right, well, if this episode spoke to your soul, please share it with a friend. And if you have time, give us some love on your preferred platform with a rate, review, and subscribe. You can also reach out to us via Instagram and YouTube under the Brightly Podcast, or via email at brightlypodcast@gmail.com.
And with that, we hope you have a bright, beautiful, and boundaryful day.